Hey everybody, welcome back to Corrections. Let's get started. This was the most problematic thing I said during last week's Corrections based on the amount of feedback I received. I said that I did something on accident instead of by accident. People were outraged. This is a good sample comment that someone wrote. You said that we are on accident doing jokes that are good. I cringe when I hear someone say on accident instead of by accident, although in this case you probably should have said accidentally. To try to better myself, I found my wife and asked her, Seth said on accident instead of by accident. Is that worthy of a correction or should I leave him alone? She responded, yes, it is. That's despicable. So here we are. So to that man, to his wife, to everybody else who was so upset, I apologize and I promise I did not do it by purpose. I said invariably instead of inevitably. I think I often do that. And I am optimistic there will be a future opportunity for me to say it the right way. Because I believe that that is certain to happen. Everybody said, well, I talked about the fact that I rented a Ford Festiva, and a lot of people said, I can't believe how many times he said Festiva wrong. And I was like, it's gotta be Festiva. Is it Festiva? It can't be Festiva. It's Festiva. And then I realized a lot of people thought I should be saying Fiesta, a Ford Fiesta. There were both. There was a Ford Festiva, and then there is a Ford Fiesta. And that seems like something you should maybe take up with Ford. Maybe Ford should be a little bit less worried about what Ferrari's doing. The other thing about that is I was talking about how when my brother and I rented that Ford Festiva, we would play Randy Newman, I Love L.A. I did a few lines. A lot of people said I have a terrible Randy Newman. That is incorrect. It's very good. Look at that bum down on his knees. Look at those mountains. Look at those trees. And I want all the jackals to know, you do not got the friend in me. Renting the Ford Festiva is not the worst car rental story I've ever had in L.A. Shoemaker and I were in L.A. We were staying at a hotel, and we were there. I can't even remember what we were there for. Maybe we were out there for the Emmys or something. And we had rented, like, let's say a Kia Optima, something along the lines of a Kia Optima. We were leaving our hotel, and we gave the ticket to the valet, and they were going to get the Kia Optima. And then Jason Statham walked out and gave the ticket to the valet. And I just remember my heart dropping, because all I hoped was, please don't have my car come before Jason Statham's, who I'm sure has the coolest car known to man. And his car did show up first. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And it was a Kia Optima. I mean, souped up. No, it was the lowest car that I've ever seen, and it was like when you have, it was like a lie flat seat on an airplane. Like he needed a periscope to drive it. And I think he was with Rosie Huntington Whiteley.
Yeah, I think he was.
And I mean, if you already feel bad, imagine if the guy standing next to you is with Rosie Huntington Whiteley and you're with Mikey the Shoe. Who's already problematic in LA. I mean, if you think he's in a bad mood in New York City, you should see this guy in LA. And people know, they know he's a big shot producer, and he's so, kids come up to him and they're like, hey, Mikey, I'm a young actor. You have a tip for me? And he's like, learn a trade. Never, I was, and that was back when those Fast 5 movies started. I was still an actor. Never asked to be in any of those films. I think if I was in one of those movies, I'd be one of those guys like carrying on one side of a plate of glass. In the street, like, whoa, steady, John. And then they like cut to. Or I'd be like a guy with a, trying to hail a cab with a coffee, and then like a car would go, boom, and my coffee would be gone. And they would just like cut to Vin Diesel being like, latte. I implied that the last Blockbuster closed in 2019. There is one Blockbuster left in Bend, Oregon. And I guess there's been a Netflix documentary about the last living Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon. Again, crazy how many corrections we're getting from the state of Oregon that are, cinema related. Because we've talked a lot about Astoria and how there is also an Astoria in Oregon and, how they have a film museum. And now we know that the last Blockbuster is in Oregon. And the one thing, though, is every time I mention Astoria, Oregon, and I keep forgetting to say this, is people there say, I don't know how you call it in New York, but we call it Astoria. But I'm reluctant to buy into that because it feels like a prank. Especially because they write the ass part in all caps. Also, they say it's pronounced Oregon. Bend, Oregon. Do you know how you get to Bend, Oregon, Shoemaker? You run into a brick wall with a boner. Someone said, hey, this is from last night's Closer Look. I have a note for the I have a note for the graphics department. You had a graphic of a tornado on a New Jersey highway, but graphics forgot to put any bicycles on the highway, and there must be bicycles on that highway because Seth called it the New Jersey Turnbike. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time correcting. I'll correct facts, but, flubs are just a thing that happens. That's just a thing that happens in life. We're not going to correct all the flubs. Plus, I found it unlikely that I said New Jersey Turnbike. So I went back and took a look. Let's see. But it could have been a lot worse if they hadn't been stuck in turnbike traffic. Let's hear it again a little slower.
Turnbike traffic.
Okay, I said turnbike. So I'm not going to blame the graphics department for that. But we did get a little more flack on a graphic. We talked about how the flooding in New York has led to a lot of steps being taken, up to and including pigeons wearing snorkels. Can we show what graphics came up with the pigeon wearing snorkel? Now, if you're watching this right now, can you guys jump to the issue here? Okay, the issue here is the snorkel doesn't cover the nostrils. The mask, if the mask doesn't cover the nostrils, graphics, the pigeon dies. And that's not the joke. I was so bummed last week because I mentioned Fine Young Cannibals, and it was on Thursday, and Andy Samberg was here because we did a Brooklyn Nine-Nine reunion show, and I didn't realize he was still here. I thought he'd left to catch a flight, and I wish he'd known he was here because Andy does an impression of Roland Gift, the lead singer of Fine Young Cannibals, and I would have had him come out. But I didn't. So then I just thought, well, I'll just FaceTime him now and see. Give me a second. He does not know I'm doing this. Hey, I'm filming corrections right now. Will you just sing She Drives You Crazy like Roland Gift from Fine Young Cannibals? She drives me crazy. Great, thank you. I love you, buddy. So, I feel like we cleaned that up. We talked about how a horse would smoke and how it would hold a cigarette, and there was a lot of talk about it couldn't hold it with one hand, so we'd hold it like this. A lot of people said actually their hooves are like fingernails, which I don't quite know how that was supposed to be helpful. People said really the issue is like just it's a joint issue. Their arms don't bend like that, so it wouldn't matter how they'd hold a cigarette. They could never get it to their mouths. And then someone said, at the end of the day, any animal who smokes is going to end up a little horse. And, I'm pretty disparaging about a lot of the things you jackals say. But that's the worst one. We were missing an L in a cauliflower Doritos graphic. Can we take a look at that again? As you notice, it's not how you spell cauliflower. And we also talked about how I have a bad Tom Brokaw. Those both came up in corrections. And a couple of people pointed this out. And I gotta say, this is some real good work by the jackals. And you know how much I hate to say that. They said, you really missed an opportunity because I feel like cauliflower with only one L is how Tom Brokaw would say it. Cauliflower. Not wrong. Big news in the Chuck community. New Dorito cauliflower. We talked about Wally, that cue cards are a part of Wally, and that he was born with a cue card. And I held up the cue card he was born with that said, it's a boy. And someone said, so you amputated his cue card? And I did not. And here's the thing. Part of when a cue card professional was born, part of the tradition, this is something that I don't think Wally will be upset that I'm saying, 8 days after it's born, there is a ceremony wherein a mohel comes to the home and just snips off the cue card. I have something really exciting to announce, a little emotional. I got a new sweater. And this sweater was a gift that was sent here last week from my one-time nemesis, Patty Lyons. Patty is one of the members, a vocal member of the knitting community who has taken a great amount of issue with errors I have made over the past 3 months when I talked about knitting. And I've been apologetic enough that Patty, in an effort to bury the hatchet, sewed me this beautiful sweater. And my favorite thing about it, and there's a lot to like about it, you can wear it anywhere. Formal, casual, it just goes great. It's just great. That's an Emmy. And Corrections did not take home the Emmy, finished tied for second, not too shabby for our first time out. And I will say that Emmys are a dime a dozen. And to get an Emmy on a homemade sweater from your one-time nemesis, Patty Lyons, is a great deal more valuable to me. And so I would just like to say to Patty, did you think for 1 second I didn't know how this was going to end? I walked into Shoemaker's office 3 months ago and said, I think I'm going to get a new sweater. And he said, sweaters can be expensive. And I said, oh, I think I'll be getting my sweater for free. Because there are 3 things that are true about the knitting community. They are foul-mouthed, they are sensitive, and they are predictable. So I'm pretty sure if I poke them, someone will inevitably knit me a homemade sweater and send it my way. And Shoemaker said, "You can do all of that in 3 months?" I said, "Buddy, I've been working on this for a decade." When I took this photo of me knitting what is clearly a crocheted blanket, that was the first piece of the trap. So, Patty, I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes in life, you're the knitter, and sometimes you're the yarn. This has been Corrections. Come back next week, won't you? I'll be here. There's a moth egg. She put... There's moth eggs!